We Are Lonely was recorded on a number of Aboriginal lands, including Gumbaynggirr country and across the Kulin nations. We would like to pay our respects to the custodians and elders of these nations. We would also like to pay our respects to the custodians of the land on which you are now listening.
Isolating myself has been a habit, and being lonely, I guess, is also it's become a habit for me.
I think loneliness is something I've definitely struggled with.
Everyone feels lonely at some stage in their life.
When we don't talk about it, when it's left unsaid, that's when it can start to spiral and build up and turn into something much greater.
And that has adverse effects on your mental and physical health.
Connection is everything. As humans and as mammals, like, we require that connection.
That anxiety, that trigger of loneliness that we get when we don't have that, is actually really important, because it's that reminder of, okay, there's something missing here, we need to reconnect.
So loneliness to me is a question rather than a situation that you can't get out of.
This is We Are Lonely, and I'm Gemma Spegg.
You know, I still end up prioritising work over spending time with people I love or something like this.
We've connected 4 people in their 20s with mentors who are helping them build strategies to connect.
Personally, when I was younger, I had this sense of family and people come together and all that type of stuff. It doesn't happen these days anymore.
This show is supported by Medibank. Before we get into things, I want to let you know that being about loneliness, this podcast gets personal and vulnerable. We'll be exploring sometimes difficult themes, including bullying, homophobia, and parental abuse. If this raises any issues for you, you can call Lifeline on 13 11 14 or go to reachout.com, which offers dedicated support for young people.
One of the real challenges of re-engaging yourself back into where you see your life go is knowledge of yourself.
Yeah.
And that means really understanding what drives you.
When you think about loneliness, it's easy to focus on how many friends you have, how connected you are with the outside world. But loneliness isn't that simple. You can feel lonely in the company of others, and you can feel content alone. You'll hear in this episode that we talk about issues that sound very different to loneliness, like bullying and values and self-awareness. These elements of how we move in the world, they are central to how we experience loneliness and what we need from connection. Dr. Lisa Mundy is a developmental psychologist from the Australian Institute of Family Studies.
Understanding what makes you tick, understanding what makes you happy, what makes you sad, and how you regulate your emotions as well is really important in this, and in understanding loneliness as well.
Professor Ian Hickey is a psychiatrist with the University of Sydney's Brain and Mind Centre. He says that knowing who we really are will also help us to work out where we fit in our society, because we're not all meant to be the same.
But what we are is important parts of our communities in different ways. And the fact that we are different is how human society operates. If we're all the same, we're all clones, we wouldn't be able to operate at all. We wouldn't have the set of characteristics that we need. Humans on their own are not very capable animals. Humans are capable because they're very, very functional social groups. And, social groups, therefore, depend on having this large number of functional individuals. What's your role? Where do you fit in?
This question of self-discovery, of understanding our place, is part of why we can feel particularly disconnected in our 20s. We're trying to find the answers to those questions. Who am I? Where do I fit? Where do I want to be? Who are my people? And at the same time, we're sorting out the practicalities of living in the world outside of our family. It can be overwhelming.
If I wanted to build a brick wall, it starts with one brick, okay? Yeah. It doesn't start with looking at the whole wall. And sometimes when we get quite passionate about something or excited about something, all we see is the brick wall. Whereas what I want to try and do with you is to see the single brick.
Yep.
So you start to build on it.
Charity and her mentor Dee are starting this process of self-focus by looking at core values.
Too often, many of us don't know what our values are. They're the things that make us angry, they're the things that make us sad, they're the things that make us lonely.
Yeah.
But we've got to be able to pull them out and have a look at them and understand that those values become pretty much the way our mind and our behaviours create a life for us. And when we're not happy or we feel disconnected, we want to smack those values just to make ourselves feel even worse. So that's why it's important to know what they are. It helps us to then find, well, where do you want to belong? Where's your sense of belonging? Where's your connection to what those values might look like? So are you ready to maybe kick into some of this?
Yeah.
Dee has brought along a set of value cards. Each card has a value and a definition on it.
Authenticity, because
To be
who wants to be fake?
to be genuine, real and true, to be who I am.
You can do this without cards. You can find a list of values online, or you can just make your own list. A good way to do it is to choose 20 values that resonate with you. They can be things you value, like wealth or family, or they can be character traits, honesty or kindness.
So these two are honesty, so that's going to go on the very important. And what was the second one?
Then you break down the list to your top 10, your top 5, and then finally choose 3 to 4 core values that represent you. If you just try to name your 3 values, it's not as thorough or authentic.
So that's your foundation of who you are. So what we're going to be able to do now...
I feel like this is selfish, and I don't know why I feel like it's selfish.
You don't have to judge them. You don't have to stand up for them. Right now, you're just getting to understand yourself. So it's other people's voices that you're hearing, not your own.
Yeah.
There's nothing selfish about wanting to lead and be a role model to others. Nothing at all. There's nothing selfish about being genuine, real and true, to be who you really are. There's nothing selfish about being committed and trustworthy and reliable to others. And there's nothing selfish about being respectful and standing up for your rights. Nothing at all spells selfishness in any of those. In fact, it's the opposite. It's about giving to others.
Yeah. Charitable. From charity.
This internal work is powerful and an important part of figuring out who we want to be in this world. It's also a way of breaking past habits, like the habit of keeping yourself hidden away or hanging out with people who don't necessarily fit your values. We're about to check in with Holly and her mentor Tessa. Holly's studying counselling and Tessa is a counsellor, so their sessions do get a little bit more therapy-like than everyone else's.
There's elements of counselling that I will bring in because there's strategies that, we use in counselling for a reason. They work, they're great, there's real value in that. And so I definitely will be able to draw from that. But at the same time, there's more about my story and my own learnings that I can share those perspectives on. Because Holly and I have a lot of similarities and because we have a lot of shared goals as well that we want for our futures, I can bring a bit more of myself to that. And that's really exciting. That's a fun space to be in.
Here's Tessa and Holly talking about how to build the skills that will help us all connect a little bit better.
There's an element of all of this that's really normal.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily make it easier, but it's there's an element of it that is also, part of just how tumultuous
Yeah.
these particular years of your life are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not spoken about, and hearing that, I go, oh, okay, it's not just me. But I just, it's that building of it, and not, you know, being able to go, hey, it was really nice hanging out. Like, you know, that, I like saying that just starts me, like, making me want to sweat. Like, that makes me really anxious. And like the thought of actually being vulnerable to someone, and like the fear of rejection, the fear of someone going, actually, or like, you know, ghosting, like that just terrifies me.
Yeah.
Do you, like, is that?
Yeah, it's super common.
Yeah.
I want to ask more about this.
Go
but
for
I
it.
also, you just share however much you want, and if you don't want it, you don't have to.
Yeah, amazing.
I guess I'm curious to know what sits underneath that fear, like, of rejection. You know, because the worst case scenario is they don't want to be your friend, and then you're where you were because they're not your friend.
Yeah.
And so I guess I wonder, you know,
where does it come from?
Well, you don't necessarily have to say where it comes from, but I guess I'm interested to know why that might prevent you from being able to do it anyway, because the reality is that, like, yes, that's possible, but it's also possible if I don't do anything, because how does it progress?
Yeah. How long have you got? No. In primary school, and we're going to go back all the way back there. I got so badly bullied. And I just, like, you know, when people say your inner child work, I'm like, don't not cry. Like, I got so severely bullied, like, just horrific. And in the moment when I was younger, it didn't ever really affect me. Well, I don't think it did. It upset me a lot, but you don't know any different. But it stuck with me. Like, how I felt about myself, like, when I was younger, like this little, you know, 6-7-year-old in a little turtleneck, just running around the playground trying to make friends. That's how I feel now still. And that's, I think, what I'm terrified of. I'm terrified of going up to someone that I've met and going, hey, let's hang out, or do, you know, trying to build it, and still feeling like that little kid, and still feeling like everyone else is going to treat me the same way, probably. And, you know, I've had so many experiences in my life where that hasn't happened, but, you know, you might have one or two where it kind of reinforces how you felt about yourself back then. So that's probably where it comes from.
I mean, I relate to that entirely. I really struggled with bullying when I was young, so much so that I went to a high school where no one knew me, and I started again.
That's what I did. I went somewhere and I was like, cut my hair, you know, change my name. No, but like, I went somewhere where literally no one knew me. Yeah.
And that stuff does stick with you, you know, like, it does. You don't want it to, but it does. It can really stick with you and linger.
It does.
In the next session, Holly and Tessa will look at some strategies to manage this feeling. We'll hear about that soon, but first, let's check in with Alex and his mentor Barry. In the last episode, we heard how Alex found his perfectionism was blocking him from seeing friends or looking after himself.
I heard some things to make me think I shouldn't care for you.
Do I ever feel like relaxing or something like this? Like, honestly, never. Like, I feel it sometimes, but only when I'm like really burnt out. Like last night, for example, I was like so exhausted that I left uni early and came home. And this is often the experience I have when I try and like unwind. I just like get to my room and I have no idea what to do. Like, absolutely no idea. Yeah. What about you? Like, it seems like you have a really strong awareness of the things you love in your life. how did you find these things? And like how do you make sure that you're able to sustain yourself so that you can do these things that you love? Because that's something I really struggle with.
Yeah. Growing up in an environment that wasn't amazing with my family, my father was quite verbally abusive. Not physically, but verbally and emotionally, and we were almost not enough. We were always, you could never be anything sort of thing. So if my way of dealing with that was retreating and leaning on the things that I loved, which is music and acting and performing and writing. So I'd keep journals, I'd, do the school play or write a song. And as soon as I saw there could be merit in taking that further, I ran. When I was about 19, I told my dad, we were in the kitchen, I was like, I said, well, I want to act and sing. And he literally looked at me, stopped what he was doing, and he said, are you dreaming? And that was fuel for me to just leave, and I knew that if I stayed, I wouldn't survive within myself. So I ran with that. Initially, in hindsight now, overcompensated a lot by being performative. I was a huge perfectionist to the point where, Alex, like, it would cripple me to make any decision if I knew I couldn't control the outcome. Working through that has been such a massive, for lack of better words, journey for me. But coming out on the other side of that and being able to contextualize it and like put it in perspective, it's really freeing. And now I'm able to enjoy what I love without that baggage of I'm doing this to run or I'm doing this to leave that environment. That was gasoline in the tank in the beginning, but now I can truly feel that freedom. It was interesting what you said about finding it challenging to do ordinary or normal things like going to the pub or hanging out with friends or watching a Netflix show or something like that. Do you have any order to your day? Meaning, do you wake up and kind of go, let me just fill this day with as much things as possible work-wise? Or do you plan it in advance? Do you not find any benefit of maybe planning some gaps?
I feel like I've tried to schedule my days, but it never works because I think my way of engaging with the world is so intense that I can't interrupt it sometimes. And if I'm like, okay, I'll do 7 hours of work today, I'll get to the 7th hour, I'll be like, there's more to do. And so I'll do another 3 hours. And then I'll be like, there's more. And it just keeps going until I can I'm literally a shell. I can't think properly. I go outside and I run into someone and I'll have forgotten how to speak, that level of commitment. That's how intense the focus has been, that I'll have to reintegrate myself into society, yeah. And so I imagine boundaries around how much work a person allows themselves to do each day is really important, because otherwise, if you were given the option, surely you would sing and act and spend time with people all day, every day. Do you have a routine? I feel like you have a routine.
Why do you say that?
Because you had a really clear idea of the things you love in your life. And I feel like if you have a really clear idea of those things, you're going to prioritize them.
I do have a plan every day. I find more freedom within structure. So for me, knowing that I'm like that, I like to have that structure, because otherwise then I can't be productive. But that's how I focus best for me, in a way that is healthy. I feel like if I stay too long with things, again, like it takes me out of connection, it can make me self-critique, because I have that old perfectionism thing from way back, and if I allow that to creep in, I don't want that. I would also just say to you, I mean, throwing my 2 cents in there is, done is better than perfect. And I try to zoom out of my life. When I feel like stifled or isolated or overwhelmed by my own choice of doing all these things, I try to zoom out and go, hold on, is anyone asking me to do this? Is this necessary? Is this affecting my well-being, emotionally, physically, my relationships? And it's important to ask myself those questions, because if any of those answers aren't great, then I have to change it. Because if, as you said, if you're self-directed, you could basically take it wherever you want. But you know what? I learned the hard way and still do. Time's up. Just the same diligence and determination that you have, I know that you can do that. Because a lazy person can't do all these things you're doing. It's a lot of willpower and determination. One thing that I would just love to encourage you to do is to throw some of that, the other side of the scale, put that laptop down, flail your arms and go, you know what, I can't touch that thing. I'm not going to touch my laptop. It's 7 p.m. Nothing's due in the morning. I'm going to go meet so-and-so for dinner. Even if I feel like a shell or don't know how to speak anymore, I'm just going to make myself do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Holly and Tessa live in different states, so this time they're catching up online.
Cool, alright. Hey, Holly.
Hello. Nice to see you again after our first session. Yeah.
How are you feeling after the last session that we had?
Yeah, pretty good. I think that it was really good. It's sort of been a bit of an eye-opening experience, I think.
I always feel that, talking about these kinds of topics, you actually leave the day actually feeling really connected, which is an interesting part of it, right? Even talking about loneliness with someone else that gets it is almost an antidote in and of itself.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely felt seen. And validated, I think.
You sort of said that there were certain things from that first session that were you were kind of coming back to in your mind. What were some of the crystallizing ideas or thoughts that you kept coming back to?
I think probably the main one for me was drawing it back to primary school and I guess, what I went through when I was bullied pretty badly. And then, just sort of thinking and framing how I show up now and maybe the impact that experience had on who I am now. Which, it sort of brought up, another element of the whole piece around maybe the role I'm playing in struggling with connection and it not just being an external thing. Makes me think, hold on, maybe I'm actually not giving myself the full opportunity to make new friends, to connect with people, because it's starting internally, and I'm actually not even allowing myself to get to the to the point of making friends, because there's that subconscious or my inner child that's really stopping me from even getting to that starting point, maybe.
We're all made up of all these different parts of ourselves, and sometimes there's a more dominant voice that speaks up, and sometimes that is that that scared voice or that inner critic or whatever you want to call it. If it is a younger version of yourself that's speaking up, if we externalize that part of you, you know, if that little girl was here in the room with us, we wouldn't ignore her. We wouldn't shut the door in her face. We wouldn't tell her she doesn't matter or that, you know, how she's feeling is wrong. We'd probably have a very different conversation if we acknowledged that she was there and we acknowledged that maybe she was just afraid. And I guess that's the kind of thinking that maybe is a good place to start for you, is if you were to externalize that part of yourself when you notice her speaking, you know, what kind of conversation would you have? You know, how can you give her what it is that she needs whilst also recognizing that, you know, she is the child in this and she needs to be led?
Yeah.
I wonder what it would mean, you know, in terms of, you know, a first kind of a strategy in terms of having that kind of a conversation. So bringing awareness to her voice when you hear her. I don't know if you want to call her little H or like, you know, whatever you want to call her.
Yeah, I like that. That's really cute.
You know, and so firstly, there's the awareness piece. So unless we are noticing and able to notice when that part of ourself is sort of speaking up or when that part of ourself is reacting, then it can be really hard to then obviously have a conversation. And it doesn't mean you have to notice her in the moment. It can also be the following day or the next, or, you know, a few days after when you're reflecting back on things that have happened. But I think maybe the invitation is for you to start to acknowledge when little H is the one speaking.
Yeah.
And start to maybe have a conversation with her, externalize her. Does that sound really abstract, or does that sound like something?
No, I think that sounds really exciting in a weird way. Yeah, I'd be, keen to do that.
And you can create structure around it. You know, you can have certain questions that you want to reflect on.
Yeah.
Sometimes some people, when they do this in a writing context, some of the strategies around this can be to switch hands with the pen that you're writing. So your dominant hand, so you're the one that you normally write with, if you're right-handed, that's your adult voice. And then when you're your child, your inner child, you switch hands and you write with your left hand.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty. I've never heard of that before, so that's actually challenges the perfectionism in me as well. Just,
Hello, Tim.
Hello, Sean.
How are you? Nice to see your pretty face.
It's good to see you again.
Tim and his mentor Sean are catching up online every week.
Just a lot has happened, I feel like, in the span of a week, which is crazy. Like, I've spoken to you about it a little bit. I've gotten snippets, but yeah, it's been an interesting week, to say the least.
Yeah, we should tell everyone that we have been in contact. We have been messaging online, sharing pictures, sharing moments, sharing fears, sharing anxieties. Why did you originally message me? What did you have to tell me? Let's loop everyone in.
Oh god. Well, so it was because I was going out on Saturday, wasn't it? Yeah, I was going.
Yeah.
I was so scared going out on Saturday, and I'd just been having a really bad day in general with like work and everything. And the funny thing is, you know, we went out clubbing. I told you we're going to Puffdorf, which is one of the most like famous gay clubs in Melbourne. And I was like, oh my god, you know, it's like the most popular, it's going to be busy, it's going to be crazy. And then it was just kind of dead this week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. So I get this message. You're like, I'm really nervous. I'm going to this place. And I'm like, oh, which one are you going to go to? And you say Poof Duff. And I'm like, is this the type of immersion therapy we want to do? Are we chucking you in from 0 to 100? So it's kind of nice to hear that it was a little more dead. Because
Yeah.
there was a lot of anxiety around it. We had a conversation about like what was going to make that experience better for you, dressing up, going in drag, doing like a light makeup, or just going in your normal clothes. And so I'm happy that it wasn't super busy, because if it was insane, maybe that would have all of your fears would have been proven true.
Yeah. At first my boyfriend was like, you go without me, like, and I was like, no, please go with me, please don't make me go alone. Like, if I go, I want you to go as well. Which was good, and like him coming out, I think really helped a lot. I think if it wasn't him like there, I would have been like, I would have got into the front of the club and been like, okay, well, I made it this far, bye. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think that's a really good observation. There's like a very negative rap put on people who aren't comfortable being by themselves. And you probably heard that a lot, or online, like, you need to be comfortable being alone. If you can't go to a movie by yourself, then you don't love yourself enough. I just totally disagree with that. I think knowing, like, setting a boundary for yourself and knowing what is going to make situations for you more enjoyable is a really important part of understanding and working with your mental health. And so acknowledging that you needed him there is fine. I think it's great. He's a safety blanket. And guess what? My husband's a safety blanket too. And I think that can be a beautiful way to inch yourself into more outings.
Yeah. Funnily enough, like, celebrating my friend's birthday, like going to the club, like, that was not the highlight for me. In fact, that was probably the worst part of the night for me.
Okay.
The actual best part of the night was going home before, like, me and my partner got in the Uber. And after the club, as we're walking, these 3 trans girls, they were coming up to the intersection where we were and waiting for the crossing, and I overheard them talking, you know, like, one was saying, like, no, you look beautiful, you look fine, like, I think it must have been like her first time out presenting as female. So it was like a big thing. And as we were crossing the road, in my head, I was like, I need to say something, like, to support them. Like, I need to say something. And I just, like, turned around and I said, like, you girls are gorgeous, you know, like, don't listen to anyone, like, you know, you're beautiful. And we sort of just had, like, this conversation. You know, they're like, oh yeah, we're just at a club, and, you know, some guys tried to hit on them, and when they got rejected, they did like the move of like, oh well, you're just a couple blokes in wigs anyway, like, no one cares. And they felt so unsafe that, you know, they left the club, and one girl was ready to go home because she didn't want to be there anymore. She had such a bad experience. She was ready to give up. And I was like, don't let them affect you. Please, like, just remember to be yourself.
This is really interesting. There's a lot of beautiful moments here that I think are very relevant to your own story, because I don't know if you feel this way, but it's often a lot easier to help other people than it is to help yourself.
100%.
A lot easier to give advice than it is to take it. It would be easier if you're trans, especially right now, to not go into public, to not go to bars. Easy to let the anxious thoughts in your head stop you from living. And I think it's relevant to your story, which is there are a lot of stories in our heads, rackets, that stop us from putting one foot forward and taking a step out. And the fact that you, as someone who's been lonely and not maybe a little bit anxious about going out, were able to be the mentor for those women in that moment is such a thing that you can hold on to, because you have power to make other people feel more comfortable. And sometimes this might work for you. This is what I do. I will often, instead of thinking about myself, I will replace my voice with someone else's that loves and supports me. And in that moment, you were that voice for them. They don't have to be afraid because there will be supportive people. They don't need to be anxious about not being beautiful enough because someone like Tim came up to them to remind them. And if you could be that person for yourself sometimes, it's like, no, babe, everything you just said to them, no, you are the moment. No, you are beautiful. Don't listen to anyone else. Don't even listen to yourself. I don't know. It feels like a very powerful moment to have happened in just a week after we chatted.
Yeah. It was good. And it's so funny because, you know, talking about how you're able to say these things to other people but not yourself, and I think it's so right. Like, I feel like if someone came up to me and was homophobic, I probably wouldn't have stood up for myself in the same way that I stood up for these trans girls, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like, this reminds me of an exercise I've done with my therapist before, which is like compassionate letter writing. And I don't know if you're the type of person who likes to journal. I know you have like schoolwork, so you're like, another exercise. You don't have to do it in journal form. You can just do it with your boyfriend. You can do it with your friends. But you actually just lived it. And so it feels like a really good moment to be like, no, that moment left you feeling good. So this exercise might be useful in the future. But we're often really bad at being compassionate to ourselves, but we're really good at being compassionate to others, which clearly you have just proven. And so what you do is you just have a conversation when you're feeling anxious or you're nervous through the lens of someone else who's capable of being very compassionate to you. And in that moment, what would Tim say? Like, let's say, for example, you're nervous about going out this week. You don't want to go, you want to cancel. It'd be easier to cancel. Like, what would Tim say to those amazing trans women, right? Tim would be like, no, you need to go out. You deserve it. You deserve to be surrounded by community. You're beautiful. Why wouldn't you? Why do other people get to go out and not you, right? You'd say all the things that I know you would say, and you can say it to yourself. So anytime you're feeling anxious, you can just remind yourself, like, I can have a compassionate conversation to me, and maybe it will encourage you to take the next step, you know?
Remember Tessa's suggestion that Holly try talking with her 5-year-old self, little H? Well, here's how it went.
You know what? It was actually, I felt a lot of resistance around doing it before I started. I think I found myself kind of putting it off and, doing anything I could to not do it, which is really, I found that kind of odd for me. I'm not really like that with sort of those sorts of things usually. And when I ended up doing it, to be honest, I think I've heard people in the past, you know, whether it's on podcasts or things like that, say, and, you know, even yoga, I just started crying. I just felt such a release. And I didn't get to the point of crying, but I felt there was a lot of emotion that actually came up for me. And so, it was, I've pulled a few things from it. I think that sort of, as I was writing, I was like, oh wow, okay. I didn't really know I felt like that then or now. It was a really great thing to do. I only did it once, but I did it for I just sort of kept going. It was like I was possessed. I was writing for my inner child with my left hand, and you should see the pages. They're just like diagonal lines of writing that I can barely read. But there was just 3 pages of I just kept going. It just felt like it was sort of like a bit of a floodgate had just opened, and I just kept writing.
Yeah, and there's something about being able to challenge that part when we know it's not our complete self. You know, I think sometimes when we're dealing with these internal thoughts and fears and insecurities or assumptions, we feel like it's all of us. And so it can be so hard to challenge those parts because it's like, how can I challenge myself, with myself? But that's why I think, thinking in parts can be really of benefit. We, we contain multitudes, right? And so there are so many different parts of us. And when we can have different conversations with different parts of us, it allows us to bring, different voices into it. And it actually means that we can then challenge some of these, ways of thinking, rather than thinking that this is just who I am. This is everything about me and I can't change that.
Barry's offered up a few different strategies to help Alex prioritise connection.
After my last catch up with Barry, one thing we discussed was trying to plan. So I use a calendar, pretty normal thing to do. But I only put things to do with like other people or job related things in the calendar. I don't plan the time that I'm spending alone. One thing that Barry suggested was trying to plan, the hours in the day. Not like in a really kind of micro-managerial way, but just being like, okay, for these 3 hours I'm going to do this thing. I'll go for a run at this time. So I guess this has been something that I've been trying to do. And it's been really hard, because it involves like a pretty big change in my attitude towards how I spend my time, instead of it being this kind of like, free association thing. And so that's helpful, it takes away, it means that I can keep track of like tasks and stuff.
Now that Dee's helped Charity to work out what she values, she's starting to take her into the next steps of self-discovery.
All right, so here we go a little bit more into that self-understanding. What about things you're good at? If we talk about skills.
I don't know my skills. That's the whole point of like self-discovery. What are my skills? What are my strengths?
I've only known you, I don't know, how long have we been going for, half an hour or so?
I'm not sure.
I can already see some skills in you. One of your skills is that you're very, very passionate.
Yeah.
All right. Now, passion's only really helpful if you can direct it into something.
Yeah, otherwise you're just standing around the ditch, skipping.
You also, so I'm going to give you a couple. So you're very passionate, and you're very, just towards today, I'm picking up that you're very people orientated. You can't have this beautiful personality and not share it.
Yeah, it's so hard, but because the whole authenticity thing has been, and loyalty and trust and all that type of stuff has been, so that's why I hide myself, is because like I seem to always attract the wrong people all the time, and because I attract the wrong people, I suppose I haven't learnt my lessons. You know what I mean? That I was supposed to learn. But like I feel like me hiding for as long as I did, and understanding that I don't need certain connections.
Well, I think you find you'll attract a very different person when you work this out.
Yeah.
Because straight away you'll think, they just don't, they're not honest.
Yeah.
Holly and Tessa are also focusing inward as a way to help Holly find her path to connection.
I don't want to feel like I'm a product of my circumstances. Like I want to feel empowered in myself.
Where do you think that power comes from?
Knowing I'm enough. Knowing that the things I value and the things that make me me are, I don't have to justify them. It's just like, that's me. And I guess allowing that to actually come out in relationships. not being scared of myself, not being scared of a version of myself that people might see that is too much or not enough.
Yeah, really stepping into your spotlight and stepping into yourself.
Yeah.
It feels like you leaning into your strengths and your strength of character feels really important right now, and a really important part of this process for you. I do have an invitation of an exercise you can do. It can feel really vulnerable, but it can be really powerful, which I think I may have said to you probably with lots of things that we've done. It's vulnerable, but it's powerful.
I'm like, okay, be my motto. No, but I mean, I'm here, I'm doing this. Like, if I didn't want to be vulnerable, I don't think I'd be where I am right now.
Because if power for you, power comes from, and empowerment comes from me trusting I'm enough, that says to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that says to me really knowing and believing in my strengths and knowing and believing in myself and my worth.
Yeah.
And so then our way to power and empowerment is in really making sure we're working on that part.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Does that feel like that's true for you?
Yeah, 100%.
So the exercise it can be a really beautiful exercise to do. But basically, if you can think of 3 to 4 people who you're close with and who know you, but you ask them to share with you 5 strengths they see in you. And you do the same for them. So it can be a really beautifully connecting exercise to do, because it's, it's just such a nice thing to hear your strengths from somebody else. But it also can broaden up our own perspective of how others see us. Some of the strengths you might think, oh yeah, I already knew that one in myself, but there might be some there that you're like, oh wow, like I didn't realize, yeah, I guess that is a strength. I didn't even realize I had that.
Yeah.
But having that perception, or being clearer on the perception, the way you're perceived in the world as well, by those that really love you and are close with you, is also a powerful way to knowing our own strengths as well and trusting in our own strengths.
Yeah.
Does that feel like an exercise that you'd be able to do?
Yeah, it feels terrifying, but I can do it.
This link between the internal experience and our relationships with the people around us is crucial. We need to know who we are and what we bring to the world so that we can be our best selves.
I don't mind focusing on yourself, being your best version of yourself, as long as you then work out, well, how do I now put that back in to the good of society? And that's where gratitude comes in, gratefulness comes in, making a contribution to others. And if you don't close that loop off, then loneliness will be a consequence of that, I believe. And maybe that's part of the shift in it's all about me. Well, yeah, it could be about me, but only so that I can be better at what I do, helping other people, not being better for the sake of myself. And I don't think human nature wants to isolate themselves from the community. Like, we're tribal. We nest, we interact with people because it brings the best out in us. The more lonely and isolated we become from that, the less happier we are, the less able we are to do things for other people. And as soon as we can push ourselves back into that tribal sort of thinking, the more grateful we become about what we are good at, and the more we want to help each other.
Thank you for your time.
It's a
I
pleasure.
appreciate it.
I'm very excited to be working with you.
Vice versa.
I really am. I think we're going to end up having some fun.
I hope so.
Nice to meet you.
You too.
Take care.
Yep.
In the next episode, we'll start to turn that focus outwards to move into the world with a bit more confidence.
Okay, so you're different in certain ways. You're not as capable in certain other ways, but forget that. Sometimes you have to find the environment in which you better fit in.
So it is currently 5:42 in the morning. I've just been out clubbing tonight, and I do really feel so lonely and isolated.
You're transitioning out of your club kid phase and into your big kid gay phase.
Yeah.
The question just kept coming up for me, you know, am I that person to other people that I'm so desperately wanting for myself? And like, I'm not.
But yeah, there's a bigger world out there than the world that I live.
If this show has raised any issues for you, there are always places to turn, such as Lifeline on 13 11 14, beyondblue.com.au, and reachout.com, which offers dedicated support for young people. For more information and tips to help if you're feeling lonely, visit wearelonely.com.au. We Are Lonely is produced as part of Medibank's 10-year commitment to addressing loneliness. I'm Gemma Spegg. This show was produced and edited by Liz Keane and Simon Portis from Headline Productions. Music is by Kenneth Lampel. Fact-checking is by Jess Chung, and our team psychologist is Alison Howarth. Our junior producer is Monica Vidgurite. Our team from Medibank include Karen Oldacre, Nigel Davis, and Demi Michael. Project and production management by Rob Ranieri and Nick Randall from Ranieri & Co.